Sevel is someone I've known for many years, but I think that even if you're listening to her for the first time, it won't take you long to appreciate her quick wit and sense of humor. She is the definition of a fintech entrepreneur who started her career almost by chance, but quickly found her niche in wealth management and financial planning. Her journey didn't end there, of course, and she quickly set on a mission to bring down the cost of financial planning services. Nicky is currently building a software to solve this, all while getting more women into the space. In this episode, we explore the trials and tribulations of setting up a tech startup in London, knocking on C-suite doors, and building a network of clients through freelance contracting. And if you're wondering how hockey can help you build a career in finance, then you have to listen to Nicky's advice.
You're right. Who knows how it came about, but a lot of people, and actually male or female, feel that asking for help is a show of weakness, and that might be something that they're not willing to do. But I would challenge that back, is that there are people out there like me who feel good about helping, and so sometimes asking for some help on something trivial can actually make their day as well.
Welcome, Nicky. I'm so glad to have you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me, Chrissy.
Well, what our listeners might not know is that we've actually known each other for a long time through common friends. And one of the things that always struck me about you was that you were certainly not shy to go out there, start new things, try new things, and meet people. And I think that has played some role in shaping your career as well. So let's start with this. People can probably hear that you're Australian. How did you end up in London? What brought you here, and what are you focusing on at the moment?
Absolutely. So I started my career down under in Australia. I'm a bit sad that you can hear my accent so clearly, because I've been working so hard on almost not trying to hide it, but kind of blend in a bit more over here in London. But yeah, so I started my career in Australia. I studied finance at uni, and was instantly drawn to kind of the world of economics and finance. I think I was kind of one of those lucky ones that knew that I wanted to be in this space quite early on. And I was also quite fortunate to get some part-time work while I was at uni, working in a portfolio administration service in wealth management, and that basically kicked off my career from there. So since I was 17, I've been working in the sector I've been in. But I got to a point, about, let's say, five or so years into my career, where I realized I wasn't ready to settle down. I come from Perth, which is known as the most isolated city in the world. And decided if I was going to start a wealth management service with clients of my own, that I needed to kind of know where I wanted to be before doing that. So I decided to go find somewhere with kind of more lights, should we say, more opportunities. And I thought, where better to start than to start the next phase in London. So I took the plunge, moved across to the other side of the world, probably one of the furthest points from my family possible. And I didn't know anyone when I first moved over. Had kind of no contacts. Obviously, I'd known some people that had done it, but was really fresh. So that was the start of this phase of my life.
Yeah, so you take the plane, you come to London, and then what happens next? Obviously, career-wise, you find a flat, you find friends. I think that's resolved. But then you end up getting a job. You're not starting straight away to build your own business. You said you wanted to get a bit of experience somewhere else and learn the business first.
That's it. I think just before I jumped on the plane, I was trying to find a job. I found there was nothing jumping out, but I spoke to one or two recruiters, and they just said, "Oh, you won't have a problem. You'll be fine." And I thought, I consider myself a risk-averse person, but everyone else seems to see the opposite in me. And I guess this is one of those examples of just giving it a go. So I knew there would be some opportunities. The first thing I did when I got here was joined a hockey club. I actually landed in Heathrow at about 4 p.m. and took the Heathrow Express straight to Paddington and went down to the local hockey club that night and trained. That was kind of my first step. I was so excited to be there, but also knew that that's such an opportunity to meet people. Hockey clubs are great for meeting other professionals, particularly in London. And actually, the first job I took was a part-time job that I found through someone in my hockey team that was looking for someone to crunch some data on some marketing analytics, and that's what kind of started me off. From there, I went to find flat.
So tip number one, if you can play sports, go for that, because that's a way, it's not what people would usually think about when it comes to building a network. They're probably, networking events or, being on social media or things like that. But no, you actually found them much more simple and straightforward way.
That's it. I highly recommend sporting clubs. And as I say, in London, it's the best place because, most if you're kind of looking to work in a London profession, the chances are there are other people that know someone or know something or have a job going in a similar industry that can help you out. And also finding a spare room. It's very, very good place to look. So yes, highly recommend sporting clubs.
Okay, so maybe when you go on spare room, focus on the professions of the people renting the room before you actually focus on who they are. But no, I think that's a fair tip. But okay, so you did some data crunching, and then where did that take you?
So I've always loved job applications. I find, particularly in job interviews as well, it's the one chance you have, probably other than a podcast recording, to speak about yourself and not be apologetic for speaking and not listening. So why wouldn't you love an opportunity to just talk about yourself? So I lined up as many as possible. I had a couple of asset managers, a bank, and I think the first role I took was a kind of a middle office role, kind of a tech focused for a discretionary fund manager. And that was kind of a bit of a baptism of fire into London, not for the work so much, but it was in Canary Wharf, and it was in November. And I remember taking the tube from Angel down to Bank, jumping on the DLR, coming out underground at Canary Wharf, walking underground to the office in one of those darkest months. For about 6 weeks, and finding myself wondering what I was doing with my life. But those are one of those moments, and decided that role wasn't quite for me. But I was in the process of quite a few others, and I'd quite consciously decided to do some contracting. So these were all contract roles I was looking for. I didn't know exactly what it was I wanted to do, and so I thought that was the most rational way to start. So I did that role for about 2 months. I look back on it and I would say to anyone else, like, if you know you're doing something that doesn't work for you, don't ever feel bad about making the decision that means the most to you. I think mental health and well-being is really important. So I look back and say, deciding to quit a job that meant I didn't see the sunlight for 6 weeks was probably a good decision.
Yeah, well, I think in London that happens a lot, and it's probably quite a shock moving from Australia as well. I'm not sure we can fix the light problem in winter, but certainly if the whole atmosphere and the place that you go into doesn't make you feel any lighter once you get there, then there's probably a problem. And it's interesting. I was at a networking event last night, and that's exactly what people were. It was part of the discussion. Like, when do you know it's time to move on? How do you decide? And you did describe yourself as risk averse. So surely when you went into contracting, which obviously comes without the security of a full-time job, you must have thought about that. And, what was the risk analysis there?
Oh, so many. So there was probably a stage, I think, it was quite, for me, I always tied down by a visa. So when my kind of 2 years were approaching its end, 2 years, Australians get a 2-year visa for the UK. I think it might be 3 now. I had to look for someone that would give me a sponsorship to stay. I remember that being incredibly stressful. And fortunately, the employer I was working for at the time, a tech company actually, offered to sponsor me so that I could stay. But what that meant is that I was handcuffed to the company, and that came with a 5-year visa. I'm a kind of not impatient, but I'm I guess a progressive person. I want to be moving. I want to be engaged, and I want to be challenged at any aspect of my career. And so knowing that I might be kind of involved in that same role for such a long time, in some sense was quite stressful for me. Knowing that I had no kind of options to change my career or change jobs or change company was stressful. And eventually I found a different job where the company was willing to take on the visa, which was great. But it wasn't until I was able to obtain a global talent visa that meant I could start contracting. And I think for me, that whole journey, there'd been a goal to say, be able to work for myself and become self-employed. Perhaps it was because it wasn't something I was allowed to do for that whole time, but it became a kind of a North Star for me. So from the risk analysis point of view, there was minimal at that point. I'd built up quite a quite a niche expertise in the wealth management technology I was working with, and that meant there were opportunities available. I just needed the visa or the kind of ability to contract to be able to do that. So when I got that visa 2019, I set up my company and started consulting.
So that's actually an interesting point I was hoping we're going to get to, because I think for those who've never gone through that, and I'm sure there's some amongst our listeners, how does one get that global talent visa? It doesn't sound like an easy process, and it never is. I suppose, was it really the desire to be a contractor, or just kind of having that independence? Is that really what helped you, motivated you, or was there something else as well?
I think at that time of doing it was the risk of getting kicked out of the country. That was the biggest motivator.
Motivating factor, yes.
But obviously, I could have always gone back to Australia if I wanted to. So I would say, aside from that, the ability to work, to be self-employed, to make my own decisions, and be able to be doing, I guess, taking my career in my own hands and having complete control over that, as complete as one can have. But that visa was definitely the high up there, and one of the most stressful times for me. Obviously, that risk of getting kicked out of the country at the time. I had 60 days to finish the application. I think it was something like 40 pages in total. Things like think about like writing a CV and pages of endorsements about yourself, and then you had to go and find other C-suite executives. I think the requirement was C-suite in a global company to write an endorsement for you. And I don't know if anyone listening to this podcast can sit there and think, who are the C-suites that you would go to, and how would you do it?
How do you do that? Yeah.
I think it was probably then that I started getting really good at LinkedIn, and having draft endorsement letters there ready to go, and saying, all I need is a signature, unless you want to say something yourself. But
there were people that you had, that those were people that you had met before. You weren't just emailing random C-suites. Let's clarify that.
Exactly.
You had worked with those people.
Yeah, they were exactly. I was very lucky, and those contacts were really helpful in the end. I think I approached maybe I needed 2, and I think I approached 4 in total. So it's a great response rate. But yeah, they were a mix of kind of people that I'd worked for and customers that I'd worked with. And they have a place in my heart. They didn't get anything back for it in return, so I will always, I guess, be grateful for that. What else did I have to do? Yeah, I think it was 40 pages of application. I think that's where I got a bit of a hint of I seem to be all right with applications. But I remember when they sent me the approval email to say that I got the visa, I couldn't read it myself at the time. I had to get my boyfriend to read the email for me. I was so panicked.
Nervous. Yes. Yeah. Well, especially if you were on the threat of being deported. But look, it all has a positive, happy ending in the end. And it does sound like some of those challenges are actually what helped you later on to gain that confidence when you were building your business and going out and looking for contracts and jobs. Because I think the idea, we always over romanticize the idea, oh, I want to work for myself and it's great to be self-employed and have the freedom, but that comes at a cost, and there's a lot of stress involved, and it's equally hard work, if not even more, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I'm thinking if you're someone, you're a manager of a firm, let's say you've had experience in hiring people, like think of the effort that goes into that hiring process to bring someone on board, whether you're deciding whether they're a permanent or a contract, and deciding exactly what you want, and then know how many CVs come at you, how many people you're looking through, and then put yourself on the other side of the fence and say, I'm a consultant or a contractor, and I'm one of this many. And just kind of realistically looking at where you fit into the ecosystem is probably important. So yeah, I think that comes back to that risk analysis that you mentioned earlier. Risk analysis with a bit of confidence, I guess.
But so that didn't put you off, and you started getting those jobs. So how did you go about it? Did you have a methodology? Was it people that you've worked with in the past? And then how do you build a network? And I think when you're working for yourself, even if it's not a company and you're providing a service, how do you build a brand almost, or build reputation and distinguish yourself, as you say, from all the other people that are looking for the same jobs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think early in my career, building a network was as simple as doing your job and doing it well. And building a name for yourself. And I was fortunate enough to be in quite a client-facing role, so a consultant in much of what I was doing. And that every time you do a piece of work, you are in essence building a network, and kind of you need to decide what you want to be known for. Do you want to be known for your delivery, or maybe the social aspect of being likable, or all of the above? What's most important to you for the future? But I think for me, later and more recently in my career, the most important thing is helping people. And I try and cover off most calls with, like, can I help you with anything? Because doing a favor for someone, it makes me feel good. It doesn't just potentially help them, but it makes me feel good about myself. And you never know when it might come back and help you. And so I challenge myself to be as helpful as possible to anyone. And I notice, I notice a lot of other people in my network are the same. And I just kind of, every time someone does do a favor for me, I just think, like, there's such a lovely person, and I want to help lovely people. And lovely people know lovely people. So your network, can just grow on the back of good relationships. So I definitely, as you say, I think it's the most important thing, particularly if you do want to become a business owner or a self-employed. You'll never know when you need some help.
Yeah, it's interesting, because whenever I speak to other entrepreneurs, particularly, but any job really, I find that we always come back to this point about being surrounded by people that you want to be more like, and getting the inspiration from them. And that thing about, if you ask for help, you usually get it. It's surprising. We're so hesitant. I think especially sometimes us as women, we really wait until the last minute before we ask for help. I don't know why it is that way. But then actually, surprisingly, you find that people actually want to help.
Exactly. And I think, you're right. Who knows how it came about, but a lot of people, and actually male or female, feel that, asking for help is a show of weakness, and that might be something that they're not willing to do. But I would challenge that back, is that, there are people out there like me who feel good about helping. And so sometimes asking for some help on something trivial can actually make their day as well.
So you did some of that. You did the networking, that worked out okay, and then you enjoyed contracting and having your own consultancy. But I think there was always something else that you wanted to do, which led you to go out there and start starting your own firm.
That's it. Consultancy there for me was always a means to an end. Where my true passion lies is in products, building products. When I, early in that London journey, I started working for a tech company, and fell in love with tech. So a lot of people in my industry say they fell into finance, but I fell out of finance and fell into tech. And working through all the journey, all the value chain in the tech industry, I decided that the product space was something that I was really passionate about. Where consultancy, you go in, you help solve a problem for a business, but you solve it once, and you solve it in a very, very small way. That's great. It can leave you feeling really great. But where my passion lies is solving that with a product which can enable you to scale that solution. So you're not just solving it once; you're solving it for many. And where my heart really lay at the point of starting consultancy was an idea I had, a company called Nieshe, which was about matching women with financial advisors. So helping with financial literacy, helping women understand more about their financial journey and their financial future, and matching them with an appropriate solution, whether that is a financial advisor or some content or some various different solutions that can help them feel better about their finances and better about where they're at. And so at this point, I embarked on starting a company at the same time as the consultancy and building this product.
Mm-hmm. And how does one go about doing this? Because it sounds very easy. Yeah, I decided to build a product and so I did it. But I think there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that you had to that we don't see, but you probably put on the end. And what was the driving force? Was it really wanting to build something, or was it more we touched upon the issue with female literacy when it comes to finance and investments?
So I think there's obviously the two parts you've called out. They're the necessary ingredients into let's say the startup space in terms of creating some sort of innovative product or solution that doesn't already exist. I think you need that desire to want to build something, and you need to have the desire to solve a problem. And so the problem there being financial literacy for women, and then me having the experience of working in product management, kind of coupled with that desire to solve something, was what was needed. And I think as many people in their product management careers will know, is that working on someone else's product or a product that the company they're working for does is a really great experience to learn how to build something. As you say, like, how do you go about it and start? Being a product manager is really pivotal to kind of looking at the problem, the solution, and how you deliver something. But many like myself kind of have this spark that feels like it needs to be unleashed on something of your own almost. I guess how did I start? I started with a business case. I always start with a business case, and I'm a bit of a I love decks. So I love putting together my first PowerPoint deck. I remember doing that for this problem, and it's something actually I look at it every now and then. I just that first deck I did for Neeshe means a lot to me. And that allows you to kind of work through the case end to end. And I think it's a lot of people that want to start up a business think it's about building the product or building the solution straight off, but really, actually, it's about the softer edges. It's about speaking to people. It's about validating that what you think is a problem is really a problem. And so, fortunately, in this respect for me, it meant I was out there to speak to women. I spoke to friends. I spoke to people in my hockey club. I spoke to basically anyone, and that it validated a lot of the thoughts I had already had about this being a problem. To this date, there are probably, most of the women I'm friends with have asked me at some point in time, should I get a financial advisor? Do I need one? I've got these problems. Can you tell me how to deal with them? And that I don't know many people that don't have those questions in their head, unless perhaps they're a financial advisor themselves.
So if someone's listening now and thinking, where do I start? We're not going to give financial advice, but it's more like, what are the steps if let's say you're in the middle of your career, or maybe even a bit earlier, let's say early mid-20s, you have saved a little bit of money. And then you're sitting, well, where do I really start?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think, I've heard all different variations of the questions, but I think it all comes down to everything in life. It's not just about finances, but it's what are your goals and objectives. Where do you see yourself in 2, 5, 10 years time? And it's a lot about self-discovery. It's about kind of looking in inside yourself and trying to understand that. And even for myself, it's hard to kind of predict where I'm going to be in those places, and it's a really confronting exercise to do. But unless you've done that, can you go and seek financial advice from someone if you don't know what it is you're trying to achieve? So definitely recommend thoughts like that.
Yeah. So if you actually decided, well, look, I don't have the knowledge, you should probably get a qualified financial planner. But then how do you find one? And it sounds like this is the problem that you were trying to solve with the niche. It's where does one find if you want a hairdresser, you walk down the street and you find one on Google. But then how do you go about finding a financial advisor, someone that you can really relate to and trust? Because these relationships takes years and years to build.
Yeah, exactly. And without trying to answer the question of one of the assumptions we had as a business, it's what options do you have? You ask a friend, you ask a family member, you ask a partner, all of which have their pros and cons. But that's kind of what most people tend to do at the moment, and that. It's not just for financial advice at the end of the day either. It's if you need a lawyer, if you need an accountant. There's kind of this professional services network of who is it, what is it that I need, who is it that I need, and how do I trust that person once I find that? It's definitely a huge problem.
So Neeshe was effectively a platform that allows you to connect with qualified advisors and, probably take some of the hassle away by using tech, I suppose.
Exactly. That's the way. And I think, engaging with the younger generations like ourselves, Chrissy, where we do go to tech first to do that. Do we go to Google? Do we go to an app? But how do you kind of make that information more available to everyone?
So, and I think that sometimes people may not even realize that you don't need to be a millionaire to be looking and using the services of financial planner. That there are many people out there who would work with you, and there are ways to do that without necessarily having to be, extremely wealthy. And I think that's another misconception that I often come across because I work in the financial services industry. But if I didn't, I probably wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think it's also it's such a shame that many people have the experience of, like, for example, let's say they go and speak to a financial advisor that was their parents or a friend's parents or something, and then they have a bad experience because they weren't the right target customer for that financial advisor, and then it kind of leaves them thinking, not let's say not good enough because they didn't have enough money to meet that criteria for that company. And I think that's definitely what we seek to try and to try and fix in that is knowing exactly what it is you need, because there are other services out there as well as the traditional financial advisor, things like financial coaches, things that are as costly as a gym membership, and just as worthwhile in some sense.
Yeah. So what happened with Neeshe? Like, where is that now? And I'm asking this question because I know that that's not the only project that you've worked on. You actually have another new project that you're investing a lot of your resources and energy into. Sometimes, you can launch a few things, you can take a few steps back, pause, come back. And I think that's an important element of that non-linearity of careers that we like to talk about on this show.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I've had a few friends ask, feel something about a project that they're working on their own. And I kind of turn around and I go, well, what do you think about Neeshe? And they go, I think it's the best idea ever. And I go, yeah, but it's paused right now. And they go, yeah, but it'll come back. So I think it is definitely a focal point for many people to know that you can have an idea. It might not always be at the front of your mind. It might not always be something you're working on. But if it's a good one, if it's a good idea, if it's a good project, it will come back. But No, most of my focus right now goes into my new company called Woven Advice, and what we do is build software, build technology for the financial advisors that are actually sitting behind the Neeshe platform. And what we aim to do is help to bring better automated tools to financial advisors so that they can bring down the cost of their services. One of the challenges and the reasons financial advice can be so expensive, or let's say the financial advisors have such a high kind of requirement or barrier to entry for new customers, is because it's really expensive to produce financial advice. So our technology seeks to reduce that cost, allowing financial advisors to bring on more clients. So right now we're very, very busy building, selling, and fundraising for Woven Advice, all while knowing that Neeshe will have its moment, because once we succeed with our Woven Advice vision, we're going to need to start to bring new customers, new clients, particularly women, into this space and make sure that everyone's benefiting from affordable financial advice.
Well, I love how it's all connected, and there are a few themes that keep recurring, and your love of financial services and wealth management, but then also the tech, which you said is really your calling, and combining those two, because you may have a great idea, but if you haven't really done that in the past, maybe you're not the best person to launch it. But where do you hope this would take you? What's ahead of you, and particularly because you mentioned fundraising, is how does one do that?
Yeah, good question. And I think, what I learned, probably the first thing I learned from Neeshe is how much grit and resilience is needed to run a startup. You're really, at the end of the day, you're only accountable to yourself. And if you wake up one day and say, I don't want to do this today, then no one's going to make you. And obviously over time that changes. As you build out a team, you become accountable to them. As you get customers, you're accountable to your customers. But really, it's a roller coaster ride. Running a business or running a startup, it has its ups and downs. And I think one of those is really attached to money. I don't think I've spoken to many founders that haven't used the word remortgage at some point, because the right thing to do is run any business lean, and I think that helps you make good decisions around your customers and good decisions around your products. But ultimately, a business doesn't pay for itself. And unless you have come from a background where you've got lots of money, or lots of people with money, it's not an easy journey. I guess that's one of the challenges what we walk into, and I think that was also one of the big challenges for Neeshe, because any platform that you're running, that you're selling to customers, individuals, where you want to provide them a benefit, but you don't want to charge them so much, that it takes time to build that network, and it takes time to build enough revenue to self-fund the business. So inevitably, you're going to have to go and find external funding to do that.
Yes, I think that's it's interesting, because when you and I were talking about funding, you were also talking about the importance of having ideally a diverse team of funders, because what I understand is that when these funders come on board, they don't just give you money. Usually they get involved in some ways into maybe providing advice, because they come from a specific sector, and you don't just need people with money, you actually need people with expertise and money, ideally. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of pressure in many industries, and particularly businesses of a specific size, to increase their EDI and diversity across their teams. There's very little of that in startup land. So there's no kind of pressure to hire a specific team or have a board with any requirements. But obviously, being a female founder, it's really important to me to have diversity in both the board level and in the team. And I think I think that's a game changer for building good products as well, because the target, the criteria of customer is going to change more and more over time. I think if you were selling into financial services 20 years ago, you could almost assume you were going to be selling into a man, but that's changing, and so startups need to keep up with that. And so it's really important to me to find I'm looking for diverse investors. And I think that I'm finding a challenge because, when you're looking for a board team, the pool of qualified potential investors or advisors all of a sudden comes back to that gender split that it was in 10, 20 years ago. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible.
And if you could, I always like to ask that question, if you could go back and, think about how you did things. Most people say, oh, I wouldn't change anything because it was all part of the journey. And I'm sure you'd agree with that. But if you could help someone else who's maybe starting out now and you probably wasted a lot of time here and there and you wish you hadn't, even though it was a learning experience, what advice would you give them?
Don't hesitate. I think time is the one thing you can't get back. So start whatever it is that you think you might want to do sooner rather than later, because you won't get that time back. Something I always ask myself or ask my friends if they're looking for advice on something is, if you do X, Y, Z or you don't do, how will you feel in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years time? And I think for me, the fear is that in 2 years time, I sit there and go, oh, I should have started that business and I hadn't. And so I think the sooner you do something, the sooner you learn from it, you get the option to decide whether you keep doing it. And so I would definitely advise that.
Yeah, well, I think that captures your personality and your spirit very well. So it's probably a great note to end the conversation on. But thank you so much for joining me today and best of luck with your future growth.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Chrissy. It was lovely to chat with you.
I hope that my conversation with Nicky has left you feeling lighthearted, but also motivated to finally start working on that project that you know you've been putting off for so long. Next time on the show, we have Simone Müller, a former ballerina who, after a serious back injury, discovered the low-pressure fitness technique, prompting her to set up one of the first postnatal rehabilitation studios in the UK. Thank you so much for listening to The Sound of Breaking Glass. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow us on your podcast app, tell a friend about us, or check us out on LinkedIn. New episodes are released every other Wednesday. It's been a real pleasure. Till next time.